Welcome to the online training for the Audible Bats Project. I'm Sarah. I'm a biologist at the Northwest Bat Hub at OSU Cascades. In this video, you'll learn about the different kinds of survey options and how to identify and report bat calls. First, I wanted to say a quick thank you for getting involved in this project. As you might imagine, bats can be pretty difficult to study. This project helps to get a better understanding of how some of our rarest bats are using different habitats across the Pacific Northwest. We couldn't do that without you. Let's start with some bat basics to make sure we're all on the same page. Bats are the only group of flying mammals. They fly using modified arms and hands, and you can see their finger bones in their wings. There are over 1,450 species of bats worldwide. They come in a variety of sizes, shapes, colors, and patterns. As a point of reference, the world's smallest bat, the 2-gram Kitti's hognose bat, weighs the same as 1 penny or a piece of candy corn. The largest bat, the golden crowned flying fox, can weigh as much as a box of wine or about 3 pounds. Bats are divided into 2 groups, megabats and microbats. All of our bats in the US are microbats. This means that they are relatively small with wingspans ranging from 6 to 23 inches. They are mostly insectivorous and they are all nocturnal. In the Pacific Northwest, we have 16 species of bats. However, bats don't acknowledge political borders, so that number can change as bats' ranges shift. So why do we study bats? Well, I study bats because they are some of my favorite creatures. They are small, fuzzy, and have attitudes which are disproportionate to their size. There are hundreds of people studying and monitoring bats across North America because they face a lot of threats and are very important to ecosystems. Despite the widespread effort being put forth, there are still a lot of unanswered questions about bats that we need to answer. As you can probably imagine, bats are difficult to study in the wild. Being small, nocturnal, and highly mobile makes finding and observing them quite the challenge. There are a few common ways that bats are studied and monitored. Catching bats via nets or traps is a good way to get a lot of information about a small group of bats, but it requires a lot of time and expertise, and it really stresses the bats out. Roost counts are a good way to find out how many bats are living in a particular structure, such as an old building. But we usually can't tell what species are coming out of the roost, and we have to already know where the roost is. While there are many places where roosts are obvious because of the cloud of bats emerging from them every night, that's not the case very often. In the Pacific Northwest, we know relatively little about where bats like to spend their days. Passive acoustics are a great tool for getting large-scale information about which species live in a given area. We set up specialized microphones that are able to record the bat's echolocation calls, and then we use those calls to identify species. This is a powerful tool that is employed across North America. Before I get too far ahead of myself, we should talk just a little bit about echolocation. Echolocation is the process by which some animals use sound to navigate when visibility is low. Bats are the classic example of echolocators. Nocturnal bats produce high-frequency clicks and chirps which bounce off of objects, creating high-frequency echoes. They can then interpret these echoes to get a mental picture of the world around them. They can sense the size, texture, and movement of objects. Each species has adapted the frequency, rate, and pattern of its echolocation calls to suit its needs. Forest-dwelling bats that eat mosquitoes need a much more fine-grained mental picture than desert bats that eat big moths. This is how we are able to distinguish between species just by looking at sonograms of their echolocation calls. But even this has some serious limitations. There are outlier bats that are very difficult to record, and so they don't often show up in the species account when we use passive acoustic. That's where this project comes in. One of our local species, the spotted bat, is so specifically adapted to hunting moths in wide open canyons that its frequency is unlike most of our other North American bats. Over millennia, this bat has dropped its frequency until it has fallen into the range of human hearing. Because of this and a few other unique behaviors, spotted bats are very difficult to record using the equipment that has been specially designed with more standard bat echolocation calls in mind. So for this project, we are asking you to journey out into the warm summer evenings to listen. There are 3 ways to participate. First, we have our opportunistic surveys. For these, you don't need to do any sort of logistical planning. After completing this training and accessing the datasheet, simply keep an ear out whenever you're outside at night during the summer. Next, we have our group surveys. Those are overnight trips where we travel as a group to a remote area to listen for bats together. Those trips include a pre-survey in-person training and transportation to and from survey sites. Surveys last 1 hour. Finally, we have our individual surveys. For those, you'll be in charge of your scientific adventure. Surveys can take place on almost any night from June 1st through September 30th, begin just after sunset, and last for 1 hour. We're not going to go into any more detail about group surveys because those are self-contained and don't require any previous training. We'll focus today on opportunistic and individual surveys. But first, let's talk about our first target species. As far as we know, spotted bats roost in tall, sheer cliffs, and the tops of these cliffs are the only reliable places to hear them. They can commute huge distances every night, and so if you're at the top of a cliff or canyon, you'll often hear spotted bats flying in the same direction along the canyon. Their echolocation calls are a low frequency and the reason we started this project in the first place. Those calls are distinctive and audible to humans with decent hearing. While these bats are on the move, their calls sound like the ticking of a clock. Here's an example. When they are hunting, they sound just a little different. The clicks themselves sound the same, but the pattern of clicking changes. They will speed up or slow down their ticks depending on what they are trying to locate. Here's an example of a spotted bat echolocating while it hunts. Our second focal species, pallid bats, almost exclusively feed on ground-dwelling invertebrates, such as spiders, centipedes, scorpions, crickets, and ants. They will even run on the ground to chase down their prey. If you see this behavior, please let me know. Bonus points if you get a video. Pallid bat females form maternity colonies to raise their young together. They do show preference for cliffs, but will also occupy bridges, big snags, abandoned buildings, and other man-made structures. At these colonies, they talk to each other. These social calls are the sounds we are listening for with pallid bats. Luckily, they are pretty distinct from spotted bat echolocation calls. Pallid bats produce rapid double or triple clicks. They don't follow any particular pattern. If you're very close to a maternity colony, you might hear a cacophony of them, but more likely you'll just hear a few while they are flying around trying to find their friends. Here's an example. This project focuses on these two species largely because of their similarities. Both like dry habitats, roosting in cliffs, and drinking from ponds. They also both have comically large ears. That has nothing to do with this project, but it's a fun coincidence. We won't focus too much on their differences other than their vocalizations. Spotted bats produce audible echolocation calls pretty much constantly while flying. They can be heard as they pass by, producing regular tick-tick-ticks. Pallid bats echolocate outside the range of human hearing, so they aren't able to be heard as consistently. It's their low-frequency social calls that we're listening for, and these can be quite sporadic. They sound like 2 to 4 sharp clicks in rapid succession. We will listen to a whole bunch more calls after we dig into the survey logistics. For individual surveys, the first step is selecting a survey site. On the Audible Bats website, there's a link to an interactive map that will show potential survey sites across the region. If you click on a site, a pop-up with some potentially helpful information will appear. Because of the scope of this project, our team has not been able to visit all of these sites in person, so whatever information we have should be taken with a grain of salt. I'm constantly editing the site information as time allows. Some sites may not have any information yet. If you're interested in a particular site or region, Google Earth is a great tool, but you can also reach out to me and I'll do my best to help you with sussing out road and hiking conditions. In addition to individual sites, I will also have some high priority general areas labeled. The Owyhee Canyon is one. Pretty much everywhere along the Owyhee is a great place to listen for spotted and pallid bats. Once you've selected your site, you can start planning your outing. The first thing I like to do is copy the coordinates into Google to get an idea of what my drive is going to look like. It's important to check the weather before heading out for your survey. Bats don't like to fly when it's particularly wet or windy, and it becomes very difficult to hear them when the weather acts up. So if a storm is expected, please reschedule your outing. It's also important to check on any active wildfires going on, as these surveys do coincide with wildfire season. Next, we need to know what time to begin our survey. Surveys begin at the end of civil twilight. Civil twilight is a measurement of light on the landscape. Basically, we're waiting for it to get properly dark. Timeanddate.com is a great site for finding the exact civil twilight time for a location on a particular day. Just move the little slider bar to the day you plan to survey, and the numbers underneath will update. Okay, getting to your site. I like to use the web map to choose my site and then use Google Maps to send the coordinates to my phone. Typing coordinates directly into your phone works too, but leaves a lot of room for error. Of course, if your survey site is somewhere like a city park, you can just navigate to the park as you normally would. But if you're going to a more remote site, it's a good idea to download an offline map. Once you've sent the coordinates to your phone, you should be able to download an area map pretty easily. This is also when I save the location to my Google Maps, just to make sure I have it. This is how one does it on an Android phone. I have no idea how this happens on an iPhone. I'll leave that to you Apple users to figure out yourselves. Before your first survey, you'll need to make sure you have access to the datasheet. If you're partial to paper, you can simply download the PDF from our website, print it off, and take it with you. But our digital datasheet is pretty simple to access and use. First, download Survey 123 from the App Store. Once open, hit Continue without signing in. To access the sheet, you can tap the tiny QR code in the corner of the search bar, and it will scan the code on our website. It will also show up at the end of this presentation. Alternatively, you can navigate to our website on your phone and click on the link under Datasheets. The survey should show up on your Survey 123 home screen. It may automatically open up a form for you. Once you have opened it on your phone once, it should be available every time you open the app. Filling out the form is pretty straightforward. After entering your name, the date, and the survey type, you'll tap the little circle symbol and the coordinates will automatically generate. If you've arrived at your site before dark, which I highly recommend, please take a photo of the site by tapping the camera button. If you've already taken a photo of the area, you can tap the little folder button. The survey start time should be the end of civil twilight, but if you started late for whatever reason, just put the time that you started listening. That's fine. When you hear your first bat, you're going to enter that time. Note that we're collecting spotted and pallid bat times separately, so you just want to make sure that you're putting the right time for the right species. As you sit and listen, you're going to keep track of how many bats you hear throughout the survey for each species. And for here, enter the last time you heard them before the survey ended. If you're not sure, that's okay. You can estimate. Just go through and fill in that last time. What I like to do is just every time I hear a bat, I enter the time, I update that last spotted bat time or that last pallid bat time. And that way you'll know what the last time is. You just stop updating it when you stop hearing bats. The survey end time should be 1 hour after civil twilight, but you're welcome to continue sitting out and listening if you're having a good time. So just put whatever time you stopped listening. When you've finished, you want to check the whole survey and then tap the little check mark in the lower corner. If you've got service, tap Send Now. If not, tap Save in Outbox. Just don't forget to submit your survey when you're back at home. To do that, go ahead and tap on the survey and then tap Outbox and Send. You'll get a confirmation by way of a count of sent surveys. Opportunistic surveys are recorded using the same data sheet as individual surveys. So let's say you're out camping with your family on a warm summer evening and you weren't planning on doing a bat survey. Or maybe you're in a place you wouldn't expect there to be any spotted or pallid bats, but you hear a distinct tick, tick, tick pass overhead. You're just going to open up that same data sheet and fill out whatever information you can. For survey start time, just put the time you heard the bat. Then fill out whatever fields are pertinent. If you heard more than one bat and kept track, then fill out the total number of bats and the time of the first and last observations. If you only heard one bat, you can just put the time you heard it in the survey start time field and then put the number of bats for whichever species you heard. Site photos are optional for opportunistic surveys. Obviously, if it's dark, there's no need to take a photo, but if you've already taken a photo of the area in the daylight, feel free to attach it. Again, you do that by tapping on the little folder symbol. And then you'll just submit that exactly the same way you would for individual surveys. Okay. We've gone over all the logistics. It's time to listen to some more bat calls. So while I play each of these, Try to test yourself and see if you can tell the difference between the two species. Okay, do you know what that was? It was a spotted bat. Yeah, pretty classic spotted bat call right there. Very nice and loud. That's about how it sounds when they're flying directly overhead. We're not always quite that lucky. Did you catch that? There's just one little double click in the middle of that little sound bite, and that was a pallid bat. Next. Okay, that one was a spotted bat and it was hunting. So you could hear the change in how fast it was clicking as it flew overhead. Okay, so that clip had a few different instances of pallid bat social calls. So they sounded a little different than the first one that I played. And because they're social calls and these are a form of communication, they can vary. We know that they vary regionally and that also possibly from individual to individual. But the key thing to note is that we had still a little double click. We could hear two distinct clicks back to back, and they didn't really follow a pattern outside of that. And so that's how we know that we had a pallid bat. Okay, that was another spotted bat. And at this point, I bet you know that that was a pallid bat. All right, what do you think? Yeah, that one was a trick. There was no bat in that clip. That was all insect noise. I like to play that because a lot of people feel like they can't tell the difference initially between insect noise and bat noise. But you can pick it up pretty quickly. One of the biggest clues to knowing if you're hearing an insect versus a bat is that a bat isn't going to be making these sounds while sitting still or while on the ground. So if it's overhead and it's moving, you can feel pretty confident that it's a bat. And if you ever find yourself feeling confident that you're hearing a bat, but you don't know which species you're hearing, maybe you can just barely hear it, maybe you only got a couple of clicks and it was pretty distant, default to spotted bat, and then you can put a little note in that data sheet about your uncertainty. We will have a notes field. So don't worry too much about that. And again, we're going to default to spotted bats. Those are the ones you're more likely to hear using this method. And there's a number of reasons for that. But anyways, okay, one more. Okay, yeah, that was another really classic spotted bat. All of our volunteer resources are available on our website, osucascades.edu/audiblebats. But if you have any trouble with those items or need additional resources, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Once summer hits, I will be traveling intermittently and I won't always have cell service, but I will do my best to help out just as soon as I can. If you're an overachiever who has already downloaded Survey 123, this is the QR code for the datasheet. And that's all I've got for you. As of right now, we have 4 group survey events officially planned. We will hopefully be planning a 5th in August in Central Washington. I just don't have the details on that yet, but I would love for you to join me on any of these group outings. But if not, and you're just going to go solo, that's fantastic. I hope you have a great summer. Happy batting.